So I am going to, I guess, start painting, because if you're live on YouTube, you're going to want to see me do a painting. So, so let me just say hi, everybody. I'm Jan Guarino. I do Fearless Watercolors, which is great because everybody's so afraid of watercolor, and I am not. So I teach regular Zoom classes and workshops in doing all aspects of watercolor. You can always find me on Facebook and Instagram and all those things. Okay, I'm going to switch cameras and I'm going to start painting in the hopes that somebody's out there. And I can switch cameras right now. And so this is a painting I just did the other day in one of our classes. And what I'm going to be doing today is I'm actually going to be doing another drawing painting of, this is actually sunflowers and pumpkins. So what I'm going to do is just describe my process a little bit as I start this whole thing. So let's see, let me get some brushes out here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over so you guys could also see my watercolors a little bit. And those are my brushes. And this is, okay, let's get started. I'm going to start with a little bit of a background because I think it'll be nice to have that pop from the off the tips of the flowers. So what I'm doing now is I'm just doing this process of just adding a little bit of water to the background. And what it does is it will let the paint flow very, very easily into that wet area. So just talking generally with watercolor is what I find is that people are pretty afraid to use too much water. And so I really love water. And so I definitely want to embrace that and use water and gravity to help things move. Is somebody talking to me? I heard somebody. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Okay, good. And somebody's recording it?
We do.
Welcome. I thought I was just sort of working solo there for a second. I wasn't sure. So what I'm doing here is a little bit of what I call reverse definition. And what that means is that I'm using the background to define the start of some of these petals that I have here. And I'm using a color, a Daniel Smith color, one of my favorite manufacturers of watercolors. And what it is a purple, a violet that breaks into cobalt blue. And I chose this color for a reason. It's because it's the complementary colors to yellow, which I'm going to be using a lot of yellow and orange. The complement to yellow is the violet and the complement to orange is blue. So I know that even if it breaks apart, it's going to look really, really good. And so just knowing this, to me, it's a really good place to start. And I also really enjoy getting a nice big wash and letting the painting have get kind of lose your fear of the white paper, which I find is pretty common that we stare at a white piece of paper. So that is another really good use of watercolor, is to just get rid of a nice piece of paper that's white staring you back. And so I'm going to drop in a little green here just to start shifting the colors. This is another Daniel Smith color that I love, which is called Cascade Green. And I love it because it breaks into a blue, it breaks into turquoise. And so what I'm doing is I'm doing what you might suggest, like soft focus. So if you're doing photography, you would maybe put your background in a soft focus. And so that's sort of what I'm doing here, is just suggesting that there's something going on in the background with a little bit of green. I don't have to be overly descriptive with it. And I'm just going to feather this down. So just a little bit of water and make it a nice soft edge. Okay. Nice. Okay, I like that. I like that. While this is drying, I'm going to work over here a little bit and just continue that violet, blue, turquoise, that color there. And I am just continuing with just, again, getting rid of a little, doing a little reverse definition, and also getting rid of a lot of white on the paper. And that should pretty much do that. So quickly, we've got, like, you know, a lot down here. What I love about these Daniel Smith colors is that they really do move so beautifully in water, and they break into these beautiful alter colors, which I love. So I'm going to put a little bit over here, and that's the other side. This is a tin can that this sunflowers and 2 pumpkins, I'll be doing those next, and you're going to see me do those. So, and because there's leaves in here, I'm just going to go ahead and just drop a little bit of green in, just to start that conversation that there's green going on there. After all, I only have an hour to do all of this in. So I want to start the sunflower, and I'm going to start it with one of my other favorite colors, which is a Mamari color called Dragon's Blood. Dragon's Blood is a cool orange, as opposed to other oranges that are maybe brighter and a little bit more warmer. This is actually, by comparison, a very cool color, very cool orange. And so I'm just going ahead and just, again, sort of inviting some of this to go into the center of the sunflower. And I'm going to carry it out with some yellow, Daniel Smith. This is quinacridone gold. I have all my colors really set up for some very specific reasons, whether it's the color that they are and how it goes on, or it's the color that they turn into, or whatever that is. There's so many different properties to watercolor, and I like to embrace them all. Watercolor can be daunting for a lot of people because they feel you can't control it. Guys, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here and just have this be something that you could kind of come in and observe a little bit tighter what I'm doing in here. I'm really just dropping color in and letting it sort of have its own conversation with the water, the color, the paper, and whatnot. So the violet, I now did what I call bridging the palette, which is finding the violet that's in the background is now in the center fold of the sunflower. I did that on purpose. Complementary colors, when they sit next to each other, they're so absolutely gorgeous. When they touch, they do what you see here, which is sort of muting the colors down a little bit. So when you see that happening, it's a nice way to know that you could tone down a color. And instead of going to brown, you might go to the complement. So I'm just dropping a little bit more violet in here as I see it sort of changing colors a little bit, and it's mixing with the paper and the water. A little more Dragon's Blood here, that deeper orange, beautiful, beautiful color. And giving these petals just a nice suggestion that they are not just one color, there are lots of colors. A lot of oranges, yellows, golds. And I'm just going to drop a little bit of that violet right in here and let that sort of take off. And I think that, you know, well, I could tell you from experience that this is one of those things that really get people very upset, that like it's moving, I don't know what it's doing, I don't know what it's going to do. There definitely is a trust that happens when you work with watercolor for any period of time, and you do allow it to unfold in front of you and do beautiful things. So let me back out for a second, and you could see how it's already reading sunflower. I'll go back in, and I want to get some of the leaves in here. And I'm going to use that Daniel Smith. There's 2 Daniel Smith colors that I like that I'm going to use here. One is my Cascade green that I talked about, and the other one is undersea green. And undersea green is a warmer green. It's got more yellow tendencies, where, as I had mentioned, that Cascade has more cool color tendencies. It breaks into turquoise. And I'll use both of them because they both really have beautiful, wonderful opportunities to have it be something really special. And you could go in, when I'm doing a watercolor, what I like to do is sort of get some initial shapes and then go in and refine them a little bit later on after it's starting to dry in certain areas. Okay. And maybe leaving some of those nice leaf veins. Those are really nice to have also. And I do something with a spray bottle sometimes. I have this dot sprayer that I just spray it a little bit, and it disrupts the pattern a little bit, and it lets it be even more creative and spontaneous in its imagery. It changes it interrupts what's going on that you might have been working on and looks a little too, oh, I don't know, perfect or not quite what you wanted, or blending it with some water. It just gives it nice opportunity to have wonderful things happen that you didn't think that were going to happen. That's the beauty of watercolor, one of the many, many qualities. And, you know, I, of course, hear, oh, watercolor is the most difficult medium to do. And I think it's because we try to control it too much. And we think that we need to make it perfect, just doing a little splattering of some nice orangey golds. We feel that it's out of control, that there's things that I didn't want it to do. All of those things will definitely slow you down, and it will definitely infringe on you having a nice, creative, fun experience with watercolor. So for sure that could happen. And then again, I find that the unexpected things that do happen are just so wonderful that I look forward to them. Now I'm going to use a technique in watercolor. There's different things that we could do to add and create texture. So what I'm doing is I'm just going in and adding a little bit more color into the center parts of the flowers, and I'm dropping a little bit of salt. A few little crystals. And you could see that it's already starting, something's happening with it, right? Something already starting to happen. Things are moving, it crystallizes, it pushes the paint away, it creates some interesting, beautiful shapes. And so I'm just going to let that sit and see what happens with that. Let me back out a little bit. And okay, we've got something going on here. I want to do the tin can a little bit, and let's get that, and then we'll go and do the pumpkins. And I don't know if anybody has any questions. If you're on YouTube, I think you can chat it, and somebody from the library will actually read it to me. So feel free to ask questions, because I'm kind of used to multitasking this kind of stuff, so I'm okay with that. I'm going to get another color in here that is a David Smith color, and it really breaks into some beautiful colors. It goes on as gray, and it's called Shadow Violet. And it goes on as a gray, but then it breaks apart into really beautiful colors. So I'm going to add some of this in here to give that kind of gray tin feel to it. And Daniel Smith, Mamori, those are, and Holbein, those are pretty much the manufacturers I use. I do have a few others. Holbein is a good one. I say to my watercolor artists that the most important part of their watercolors are you making sure you're using a quality paper. That's really important. If you're not using good paper, then you might as well just, really not even paint, because poor paper will interfere from you having a really good painting, more so than any other of your supplies. Your paper is super, super important. So I'm using Arches. This is Arches 140. When I'm doing bigger paintings, I will do Arches 300 hot press, which has a nice tooth to it, not too toothy. The cold press has a little bit more tooth to it, and really gives you a nice texture, and yet holds on to all of the really good qualities that you want your watercolor to have. And let's get into the pumpkins. I'm going to go a little closer for you. Let's see if I can move this up a little bit. Zoom out a little bit. There you go. Okay. Now, of course, we know pumpkins are orange, so I'm going to definitely get my orange in here. But I'm going to interrupt it with some more colors. No question about it. A little of my dragon's blood. As it comes down, I can deepen the color a little bit more. And it's nice to hold on to little sparky whites that help it to look very painterly. I guess that's the, I use that word a lot in class, that idea of something being painterly. Meaning we have the photo. We don't need to have the photo be perfectly rendered unless that's what you really want to do. I personally don't. I like the interpretation of a photograph to a painting. I prefer that. That's where I find my style comes into play, and it gives me a chance to be much more playful with my painting. So you'll notice I'm using all the colors that I used in other places on the painting, and yet it's what we call bridging the palette and having all those colors sort of be present. I do want to add a shadow here. All right, I'll do the shadow in a little bit. Really want to charge up that orange. And it makes me want to put a little more orange up on the top here. Because watercolors are done with water, what happens is, of course, they tend to dry a little later. So you have to just watch where you're at all times, because it could dry a little lighter than you want. And you don't want to overwork it and go back and back and back. So you want to be sure you find a good balance in the moment. And if you don't, then, while it's drying or while you're working in another area, you may want to go back in and address that area and just recharge it up with some color. So this is just sort of a first wash. I can definitely go into any part of this as it dries and give it some more color, some more definition, all of those things, right? All of those things we want to do. But there's a timing to it. And what I find with watercolors is that very often people go in a little too soon with their fixing, and they try to control it a little bit. A little bit of gravity. I'm going to tilt this and let that travel up a little bit. People are also very afraid of that happening. I totally love that that just happened. So I'm not worried about that at all. I'm going to build the shadow a little bit. So what I'm doing is I'm just charging the very bottom up with some color. And I'm going to build that shadow by taking from that bottom. So here's just really water on my brush. I'm going to zoom into this a little bit because I think it's really interesting to watch building a shadow. Here we go. So I'm just inviting some of that color to come into my shadow. And I'm going to back out and let you see it. So it just created a nice little shadow on that area. While everything is drying, I try to work around a painting. What I'm going to do now is work on those stems. And I'm looking for a particular, oh, here's my rigger. Okay. So again, brown, I'm not a big fan of brown, but if I use my yellow and my violet, I could then create a brown. It's a little orangier than I wanted. Here's a little more yellow. Okay, here we go. And these stems are kind of fun because they have these nice twisty type textures to it. And now I'm dropping in the violet while it's wet. The two colors are going to mingle and they're going to create a brown tone. I don't usually pre-mix my paints in my palette. I prefer to just let them have fun on my page. Can always autocorrect. I think brown is just a really tough color to make it that interesting to me, so I prefer not to. Oh yeah, I like that shadow a lot. Just want to charge it up a little bit more with a little bit more color as it's drying. Yeah. So yeah, I'm just looking at the painting and I'm just moving around and finding different textures. I don't know if you could see the texture that happened with the salt. I'll zoom in on that and I want you to see that. That looks really, really good. Okay, let's get this little guy here. I love these little tops to these stems of these pumpkins. They're just so, I don't know, they have a lot of character to them to me. So I'll just talk about my classes for a second. I run Zoom classes. I do 2 a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And if you would like to sign up for a newsletter, by all means, you could go to my website, which is Jan Guarino, Guarino, fineart.com. And on there are a lot of YouTube videos. There are templates and my supply list, and there's a lot of information on there. So if you're interested, I welcome you. That'd be fun. Okay, I want to zoom in and just show you for a second the salt that happened up here. It's kind of like a fun texture. And how much more I do really depends on time. I have a good amount of time. So now I could go back in and I could maybe deepen some of the colors. Watercolors are sort of about timing. you don't want to work damp necessarily. You want to work either dry or wet, which is what I'm doing right now. This is on the drier side, so I could go in and sort of build some of that. But that's kind of fun, what happened with the salt there. That's a nice texture. It's a really fun texture. And you can see also how nice the yellow and the violet sit next to each other. That's because they're complements. But where they touched, they toned each other down a little bit. And that's exactly what they're supposed to do. That's exactly what complementary colors do. So your complementary colors are orange and blue. Well, your primaries are blue, red, and yellow, right? You can't make those colors. But the complements are yellow is to violet, blue is to orange, and red is to green. So the easiest way to remember these is by saying, well, red and green is, you know, the Christmas holiday, and yellow and violet is a holiday of Easter, and blue and orange is go Mets. There is no holiday unless people consider that a holiday. So I'm just going in and sort of building some of the sections a little bit here. And just giving a little bit more punch in terms of colors and contrast. And to me, there's a freshness to watercolors. I mean, yeah, there's definitely styles out there that are very precise and very, every single piece is very, very well thought out. That's really, I'm not going to say I don't think my watercolors out. I do. I know how I want to attack them. I will say that I tend to be a little bit more on the looser side, although I get a very good likeness to whatever I'm painting. So, it's just stylistic, whatever sort of interests you in terms of style. In watercolor, what you are willing to lose is what edges you're willing to lose. Those types of things sort of start defining your style. And I'm willing to lose edges and then find edges. Lost and found edges is what I find really so fun about watercolor. Okay, I want to go in and work a little bit on the leaves. I got a good 20 minutes, so I've got time. Even though if I stopped right now, you'd know they were leaves. You also want to build that tin a little bit more. I want to get some texture in there. So how am I going to get that texture is with a scumble brush that I created. It just is a rough edge, and I can go in and just texture it a little bit. Let me go in closer so you could see me do this. So here, so this is a scumble brush that gives you the chance to sort of create some texture. See how I'm able to just, it already has this rough kind of edge to my brush because I cut it that way. And it gives me some nice marks. And those are the kinds of things that I really enjoy with watercolor, is finding the things that will help me to keep it fresh and not overwork it. And that's what I look to do. But watercolor can also really give you some tremendous opportunities for detail as well. I do a lot of commissioned portraits for people, pets and babies and adults and whatnot. So you do have that nice opportunity to do those kinds of things as well. It's all a matter of what you want to do. So let me back this out a little bit. I'm going a little off and you can't see what I'm doing. Okay, I want that to dry. I want everything to dry. So the leaves are dry. So that's the time to go into the leaves. So knowing that there's a timing to things that you want to explore, and know that there's a timing that, you know, you don't want to overwork an area. You can overwork an area. There's no question about it. Knowing that ahead of time sort of gives you the opportunity to not do that. So now I'm going in, now that I have my wash, I'm going in and I'm making marks that are a little bit more definitive, darker, and a little bit more detail. And that's exactly, this is the right time to do this. While other areas are drying, I could go in and now make this a little fussier than it was originally. And find those details. You know how sunflowers have those little leaves that come off of the petals on the top. You want to get those.
Jan,
Yes.
we've had a question that could you show us the photo you're painting?
Oh yeah,
from?
sure. This is the photo that I'm working with right here. So I just sort of cut, I brought this up a little closer and I'm just doing that portion. So that is the photo that I'm working with, but I changed it a little bit. But thank you for that. I try to use my own photos or photos of people that I know. You know, just finding something on that you find online is not always free to use, even though you found it there. So you do have to be a little careful that you find photographs that you get the photographer's permission to paint them. That's kind of, you know, in this day and age where we can pretty much find anything, an image of anything that we want, we've got to be a little careful about the copyrights to photographs or artwork or whatever. Could even suggest another flower over here. I'm feeling like maybe it needs a little bit of color over there. So let's go ahead and add another flower over here. Maybe the back of a flower. The yellow will sort of just do it. It'll automatically say there's another flower here that we're not seeing the whole thing of. And that's what I do when I feel it's just a little fussy. I'm just adding a little bit of orange into some of the leaves because it helps to have it be, you know, you don't want it to be like, here's the yellow, here's the green, here's the orange. You know, you want it to be more integrated than that. And so by introducing other colors where you might not think that you would have them, helps you to do that. This is a rigger brush. It's a long, narrow brush. It was actually created by people who, or artists who wanted to paint the rigging on ships. And so they developed this to be able to line, they're also called liners. And so it's a nice brush because it gives me very interesting marks without it being overly, it does some interesting marks for me. Let me put it to you that way. I want to get a little violet in there too, a little splatter of violet. I'm waiting for my pumpkins to dry a little bit more, and then I could go back in and do a little bit more on those. You can overwork any painting, so I like to sort of make sure that I move around a painting so I don't overdo it. This is a little dragon's blood. I'm just going in and getting this a little bit richer, a little bit darker. It's a fabulous color. Nice, rich, deep. I had years ago, I'll tell you the story of Mamari paints. Years ago, I took a workshop. If you guys remember, Pearl Paint in its day used to have workshops at the, I don't know if it was the Marriott or the Hilton, I can't recall, one of those in 110. And I took a workshop with this one artist, and she used Mamari paints. And you were able to go back into the main area and purchase. All the suppliers were there. It's amazing nobody does this anymore, but it was so brilliant. And you were able to go in, and I went in, I bought every single Mamari paint that they had. It was so fabulous. And I still use it to this day, a little more obscure, not as easy to find as some other paints readily available, but you can. A couple of stores have been kind enough to carry them for me. Blix actually carries my dragon's blood for me. And Reeby's has also carried that, the dragon's blood, and the other color that I love from Mamari is indigo. Their indigo is beautiful. And you can find them online. And so I'm just sort of giving myself some nice interruptions of nice darks. This is really wet here, so I could go in and drop some colors in, reverse define maybe some stems, suggest the other flowers. That's all good. Okay, I want to get back down here. Now that I built this, you can see down here is a little weaker. I want to build down here a little bit more. And I think we should be winding up pretty quickly then. My brushes, I don't use sable. I don't really want to use sable. There's so many beautiful choices out there for synthetic that are really fabulous brushes. So I, encourage you to find good synthetic brushes. There's a plenty of them out there. Escoda Prada is a very good brand. There's another one. Cheap Joe's has got a good one called Silver Black Velvet, which is really great. And, I'll just talk about this too, because I do talk about this in the classes, is that at some point you're looking around and you're saying, I have a hot mess. And it's very true that at some point of your painting, you may feel that you have a hot mess. But I would say that stick with it, because there's probably something beautiful that's happening that you just haven't completed yet. Is really all it is that you're just not done yet. You have more to go. So timing, making sure you're working either wet into wet or in dry area. That's really important. And having a whole arsenal of tools that you can have at your disposal: salt, spray bottle, different brushes. All of those things are really, really so helpful when you're doing a painting in watercolors. Nice soft shadow. And maybe a little bit more texture on my tin. I'm going to drop a little salt and see what happens. Could look a little crustier. Drop a little color into there. Go a little closer for you. So it's breaking up. You can see that gray broke up into some nice, interesting colors. Usually it's a blue and a pink. So it doesn't really hold on to it. But of course, if you sit and you move it with your brush, it will stay gray. If you let it move into water, it will then show its properties and break apart. So much of watercolors to me is just allowing something to happen. I don't know if you could see that blue kind of happening there, but it is breaking apart. A little salt. And the salt, once it's dry, just falls right off as soon as the painting is dry. And they say you can't correct a watercolor, but that is not true. You absolutely can. I'll show you one quick way. I could take, there's a color called Jaune Brilliant #1. I don't know French, but this is a light whitish color. And I could take this and I could just hit it with, let me go in a little closer for you. Can you see that? It will actually give me some, if I wanted to have some white reflections, I absolutely can add them in. It has to be dry. This is still wet here, so that's not going to work. But it does actually let me find whites. Another thing that you could do, I'll just show you really fast, don't be scared by this, let me back out, is if you have a spray bottle, I'm just getting my water here, and let's say I don't like an area, I can actually, it sprays it right off. So see what I just did there? It just lightened it up, and it almost as if it's like a stream of light is coming into there. I actually really like, I usually love when I do this because it just breaks things apart in an interesting way. And so it's absolutely not true that you can't correct a watercolor, because you absolutely can. So, and also the other thing that I do is I will also want a painting to rest. So I do like the idea of this painting resting, and then I could go in and maybe do some other things to it. You don't want to overdo it too much in the moment, because you absolutely can overwork it. So maybe what I'm sort of missing now is just some little squiggle kind of things coming out from the still life, from the arrangement. And of course, this is still wet here, so it really won't come down, but I would like some of that to hit the over into the tin actually too, would look really good. So, and of course I have to splatter. So another fun tool is a toothbrush, an old toothbrush. And you just get it a little bit of wet, and then you go in and you get the color you sort of want to have a little splatter with. In this case, I chose a little purple, and a little bit of splatter always goes a really long way. If it's wet, it will dissipate. If it's on dry paper, you'll see the splatter. So, is it 5 o'clock? I think it's just about 5 o'clock. This is, it's got a little sheen on it because it's wet, but we used a lot of techniques. We used a spray bottle, we used salt, we used a toothbrush, and a lot of really great colors. So this is, to me, you know, not done, but it's close, you know. It's really, really good, you know, to have some fun with it and be loose with it. And I hope you learned something. I hope you feel something for watercolors that you might not have realized, that, you know, maybe you want to try it. I don't know if there's any other questions anybody has, but again, you could find me at janguarinofineart.com. And I hope that this encourages you to maybe try watercolor and maybe have some fun and, you know, loosen up, or, you know, I mean, the pandemic has sort of been an interesting time to get into things that maybe you might normally get into. So I'm just going to come back out of the video for a second. And these are all different things that we've done in class behind me. And we do a little bit of everything. We do the seasons, as you could see. We do, we just did a portrait series. We're doing figures now, faces into figures. And we're always interested in trying and exploring new things in the classes. And so I'm so glad you guys came. I don't know who's out there. I can't tell. Maybe email me and let me know you were there, and or leave a comment on the YouTube video. We'll be putting this, I think we're going to be putting this on YouTube. I'm pretty sure the libraries will be sending me a link, and it'll be on the libraries, and it'll be on my YouTube channel as well. So, okay, we have 3 minutes to spare. Just goes to show you what you could do in an hour, right?
But everybody said thank you on the chat feature. They said it was beautiful and they loved it. And thank you so very much for sharing your talent with us.
Thank you. We'll be back in a month and doing another one. Don't know what we'll do, but we'll figure it out. We're painting the season. That's what we're doing.
It's wonderful. And this should be recording and will be up on the YouTube channel. Okay.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you putting this together for me. You, Harbor Fields Library, South Huntington Libraries. Thank you guys for sponsoring another Jam Cam. I love it.
Thank you.
All right. Everybody have a great day, and try painting. Go for it. Watercolors. Fun, fun. Have a great week, everyone.